Hello everybody and welcome to a very special episode of Pauper Ponderings. Again, my name is Austen, and this week, on this very special Wednesday, we're going to be talking about my picks for the top 10 cards for Pauper in Amonkhet. Amonkhet? Whatever, however you pronounce it. Thanks all for watching. Again, my name is Austen. This is Pauper Ponderings, brought to you by the Mana Base. I guess it's right there. There? Yeah. Right there. So special shout out to them as well. If you like this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to this channel, as well to check us out online, www.themanabase.com. If you like me specifically, please make sure you check out my Patreon. It's just down in the description down there. I'll be naming out my newest Patreons tomorrow for my newest Pauper Ponderings video, which will be recording right after this, but regardless. And this week is the pre-release coming up, so if you want, make sure you tune in to www.twitch.tv/FusionWPG, where myself will be streaming the Fusion Gaming / Galaxy Comics pre-release here in Winnipeg, Manitoba. So if you want to check out the very first, I guess, time that Amonkhet cards are going to be played in real life, make sure you check that out. We're going to be streaming it all day, starting at right around 10 o'clock Central Standard Time. So make sure you focus in on that. We're going to do some interviews, that kind of thing. As well, on Friday, we are very glad to announce the Mana Base is bringing on Mark from Life Starts at 20. All of his information is going to be in the description down below. If you like his videos on Cube, that's what we're going to be having. Starting on Friday, we're going to be having some exclusive videos from Mark with Life Starts at 20, so that is very exciting as well. But you guys are here for my top 10 Amonkhet cards for Pauper, so why not get right into it? And obviously, because it's a top 10 list and there's more than 10 cards, we gotta have some amount of honorable mentions. So let's get right into it here with Supernatural Stamina. I like this card a lot because I've played a lot of Pauper decks that are good with this type of effect, this type of unearth, type of undying evil sort of effect, and this is kind of the same idea, just a little more aggressive. Giving a target creature +2/+0 till end of turn, and then if it dies, return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. That would work very well with a lot of those, maybe the Zubera cards that we played with, any sort of persist creatures. It's just going to be good in general. So I wanted to mention this card. I'm not sure if it has any real usage in the standard format, but abusing ETB effects rather than just straight up making a creature indestructible or regenerating a creature definitely has its merits, and supernatural stamina definitely shows that. Next up, Quarry Hauler as an honorable mention. This is 3 and a green for a 4/3 that essentially proliferates, I guess you could say, and there are definitely a lot of cards in the Pauper format that could benefit from this. I'm just not sure where that goes. So maybe if you want to help me out in the comments, let me know what you think the best uses for Quarry Hauler are. But I do think that this is a card that can see play. Maybe if it's abusing -1/-1 counters on your opponent's creatures, or if it's abusing +1/+1 counters on some of your creatures, maybe some of your undying creatures. That could be an option, and I think that this card has a chance to be a somewhat role player in a deck in Pauper. And the final honorable mention, we have Tattered Mummy. This is 1 and a black for a 1/2, and when Tattered Mummy dies, each opponent loses 2 life. I know that there are a lot of decks that like to use these leaves or dies triggers. We see even Supernatural Stamina works with this card fairly well. The fact that it's a 1/2 kind of makes me a little hesitant, but I could definitely see a Tortured Existence deck or, a Carrion Feeder style strategy that can abuse the dying ability of this Tattered Mummy, and I do think that this card could possibly find a home in something like a zombie deck, especially with the new white zombie that they printed that can tap creatures when zombies come into play. I think that there may be even a deck there. Now, I'm not saying to go and brew that deck and then submit it to me so I can play it, but definitely think about it. So those are my honorable mentions, so let's get right into the top 10. These are the top 10 cards that I think will affect the Pauper format from Amonkhet. So coming in at number 10, we have Final Reward. So this is 4 and a black for an instant, exile target creature. Now, on the surface, this card does not look that powerful. The reason I bring it up is because different Tron variants have started to play the card Scour from Existence. Now, obviously it works very nice. You have 7 Tron mana, 7 for Scour from Existence. Works very, very nicely. A lot of those decks play black for a card like Forbidden Alchemy. If they're looking for a cheaper effect that can exile, basically get rid of any creature in the Pauper format, I think that this is a pretty good option. Again, exiling creatures in Pauper is huge because you have cards like Mortuary Mire, you have cards like Unearth, you have cards like any sort of, bring back from the graveyard effects. Those card advantage is so key, and grinding out is so key in Pauper that I can definitely see Tron wanting to play this as just a cheaper answer to some creatures that they really need to deal with. Coming in at number 9, we have a sideboard card. We have Scarab Feast. So this is 1 black for an instant, exile up to 3 target cards from a single graveyard, and then it has cycling for 1 black. So the reason I have this card on here is because, again, it just adds to the depth of sideboard options that the Pauper format gives us. And a lot of people play basically Relic of Progenitus and maybe sometimes Tormod's Crypt, sometimes Nile Spellbomb. I think this card is, again, just another card to add to the arsenal. It's a pretty boring card. Comes in at number 9 for that reason. But the fact that it has cycling, the fact that you're able to do it at instant speed, doesn't have to be in play, that is something that is huge. Some decks play Fairy Macabre. I think this card is just better than Fairy Macabre, going to be most of the time. It doesn't work against cards like, or it doesn't work as well against cards like Gurmag Angler and that kind of thing, because the reason that Relic is so good against the Gurmag Angler decks is that you can consistently make it so their graveyard does not have any cards in it. Meaning that their Gurmag Angler is going to cost 6 mana, their Chainer's Edicts are going to be tougher to save. This card is still very powerful, and I expect to see it in a lot of sideboards moving forward. The fact that it has cycling means that it's never going to be a dead draw. There's a lot of cards in this set that, due to the fact that they have cycling, makes them, in my opinion, very potent cards coming through into the metagame, and we're going to see that in detail in a couple more of these cards coming up. So next up we have, I think, a card that not a lot of people have talked about. That is Cradle of the Accursed. So this is a land with the subtype Desert. Taps for a colorless, or you can pay 3 and tap it, sacrifice it, and make it 2/2. The reason that I bring this card up is because in a world where Pauper is about card advantage, Pauper is about grinding and getting those little edges a lot of the time, if a deck is able to play essentially a card, because a lot of the time a 2/2 black zombie, that is equivalent to a card. There's the kind of the theory of what is equal to a card, and it's like 2 damage, a card, or a 2/2. All of those things are all equal to each other. And the fact that in the mid game or in the early game it comes into play untapped, adds you a colorless, which is fine most of the time, especially if you're playing things like Prophetic Prism or Prismatic Lens, and then you can pay 3, tap it, and make a 2/2 in the mid to late game as a blocker, or just as a way to start to turn that corner, because a lot of the time in Pauper, especially control decks, I can definitely see this as like maybe a control deck, not a finisher, but just a card to play. If you remember Standard a couple years ago, there was like a blue-white control deck that its really only win condition was either Elixir of Immortality or the 3 to 4 Mutavaults that they played main deck. Now, I'm not saying that Cradle of the Accursed is as powerful as Mutavault, but it definitely harkens back to, I have a land in my deck that really costs me 0 to put into my deck. It's going to come into play untapped. But in the mid-game, I get a 2/2 that can block and be trade with a creature. If you can get this 2/2 to trade with a creature, that is huge. That is so big for the blue-black decks, because sometimes they just what happens is they just run out of answers, and you just have like a 2/2 or a 3/2 in play that just attacks them for like 12 damage, and then you're eventually able to kill them. The fact that this card is able to make you a threat, or not really a threat, but just a roadblock, in a sense, for almost no opportunity cost of putting it into your deck, I think that this card is being overlooked, and it is definitely going to be a card that we see in a lot of these slower, kind of grindy decks moving forward in the Pauper format. Moving on to number 7, we have Hekima Sentinels. So there's going to be a cycling or discard themed deck this will definitely be in it, and this will definitely spawn that archetype. It's 2 and a blue for a 2/3. Whenever you cycle or discard a card, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. I've seen talks of it going into something like Blue-Green Madness, where you have, Wild Mongrel and the flashback spells to kind of fuel it. Depending on where this sees play, I can imagine this thing attacking for 3 a good amount of the time. Then the question becomes, is a 3-mana 3/4 good enough? I don't think it is, but there's situations where you can, make it a 4/5, make it a 5/6. And that's where this card, especially from blue, definitely starts to turn the gears a little bit. And the fact that we get a blue creature that has some decent stats, and I could see it being played in, again, like a Blue-Green Madness, blue kind of red tempo-y style deck, I could definitely see this seeing some amount of play and maybe even spawning its own archetype. So keep an eye on this one. That's why it's in at number 7. In at number 6, we have the Greater Sandworm. So this is 5 green for a 7/7, and it cannot be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. This was actually the card that got spoiled as like an 8-mana 20/20 with just flavor text. But this one a little nicer because it has cycling. So the reason this is on the list is because I've played decks like, Damned Cycling that was really, really sweet. And again, this could just use this card. It's just another option for those styles of strategies. This is a decently sized creature, 7-mana 7/7. It has a good amount of evasion, as a lot of the decks where they're going to want to be blocking on the ground are going to have, the Seagate Oracles, the Augur of Boluses, any sort of, Throibid Inspectors, that kind of thing. This card is just very, very good at overpowering. It doesn't matter about those cards. You're able to just swing right through. And I think that this kind of can't be blocked by creatures power 2 or less definitely applies to this Pauper format. You see a lot of token strategies. It's just going to deal a lot of damage, and I can see this thing dealing easy 7-14 points of damage. The real reason it is on the list, though, is because it has cycling. So a lot of the time, you get into the spots with, like I've seen Ulamog's Crusher gets just stranded in hands infinite times when you're trying to play to this board state, try to get yourself back into a game. The fact that Greater Sandworm has the ability to just get cycled away for 2, and while also being a good body. We saw the Ceradon, it's like a 6-mana 6/4. That card just, the body just isn't good enough. You're trading with, things like Copper Carapace Forger. You're trading with things like any sort of 4-power creature, which are just abundant in the Pauper format. The fact that you need, 2 medium-sized creatures or 1 really big creature to tangle with the Greater Sandworm makes this a good body on a cycling card where you don't see that very often. Normally, it's gonna be a bad rate. You look at cards like Jungle Weaver. That card just doesn't do a lot for you. Whereas this thing, 7/7 with evasion, it is huge, and I think this thing's gonna take a lot of chunks out of a lot of people's life totals. So now we get into the top 5. So if you want to pause the video right here, as I once again thank the mana base, please go down and below and see if you can pick what my top 5 are. I'm not sure how. Pauper is so weird, right? There's so many times where you're not sure, you have differing opinions, especially the format is just so volatile that things can change at the drop of a hat. So I could definitely see people's lists being completely different than mine. All of these cards could just not be on people's lists, or they could be on my list and not on your list not on my list. So I'm excited to see. So pause the video right now, go down in the comments, tell me what 5 cards you think are the top 5 cards from Amonkhet for the Pauper format. I'll give you a second right now, too. Why not? Greater Sandworm, look at that art. It's great. Over here. Nope. This way. Right there. All right, coming in at number 5. I think might be a bit of a surprise to you, some of you people, is Cartouche of Solidarity. So for 1 white, you get an enchantment or a cartouche enchant creature you control. When it enters the battlefield, you create a 1/1 warrior creature token with vigilance, and then your enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has first strike. So why is this card so good? Because it goes into Boggles, which is one of the most frustrating decks in the entire format to play, and I'm really sad that they actually printed 3 very good cards for the Boggles deck, and maybe they're on the list coming up. And it is very frustrating because that deck just doesn't deserve to be a deck. Anyone who plays that deck is, I get mad at the blue-black control players because that deck is just terrible and like they just never win. But the Boggles deck is good sometimes, and it's so frustrating to play against. Anyone who Boggles is my pet deck, Get out of here. Anyways, Cartouche of Solidarity. The reason that I think it is strictly an upgrade to Hyena Umbra is this reason right here. In Modern, you have cards like Engineered Explosives. You have cards like Damnation. You have cards like Wrath of God. You have cards like Anger of the Gods. You have cards like Radiant Flames. You have all of these effects that destroy a massive amount of creatures. So the totem armor of Hyena Umbra is very, very, very important, especially on something like, Damnation, Wrath of God, that kind of thing. In Pauper, that doesn't exist. The biggest sweepers that we have is something like, Evankar's Justice and Electra Curry. Both of those are most likely not going to hit any of the Boggle creatures. What is the bane of Boggle creatures, though? Chainer's Edict, Diabolic Edict, any sort of these Edict effects. And Cartouche of Solidarity basically stops that from happening. And I think pretty well this is a direct replacement to Hyena Umbra. You might be calling me an idiot. I don't know. I've never played Pauper Boggles before. But looking at it objectively, this looks like a strict upgrade to Hyena Umbra in every way. Giving you the 1/1, giving you that Edict protection is so huge. And I think that this is going to do a good job of cementing Boggles as one of the best decks in the Pauper format. And I'm kind of sad about that, unfortunately. Coming in at number 4, this one's going to be, I think, pretty controversial. We'll see. It is Haze of Pollen. This is 1 and a green to prevent all combat damage that we dealt this turn and has cycling for 3 colorless. Why is this on the list? Well, because Turbo Fog is a deck that I've played against a decent amount in the Pauper format, and it always seems like it's missing something. Its fogs are fine, it has this Jace's Erasure combo plan, whatever they're trying to do. But a lot of the time what happens is as I've seen them kind of get stuck with all these fogs in their hand, and they can't stop something like a Grey Merchant, or they can't stop something like burn spells. Haze of Pollen, while also being a fog, is a way to cycle into your counterspells to hopefully stop the Grey Merchants. So I think this is a pretty good addition. I'm not sure if they'll use it right away, but I do think that this is a good tool for a pretty big fan favorite deck in Turbo Fog, and I think that it's a nice little addition to that deck, and I think that it will make a splash. So coming in at number 3 is Banefaction of Ronis. So this is 2 and a green for a sorcery. You reveal the top 5 cards of your library, and you may put a creature and or enchantment card from them into your hand, and then the rest into the graveyard. So, the question is this card better than Krufix's Insight, where you get to look for just a bunch of enchantments? And I think it is. And I think this card could see play in Boggles. For the reason being, one of the main ways you lose with Boggles is not having a creature. This thing, unlike Krufix's Insight, defines you a creature. 5 cards is a pretty good chance you're going to find one of your Boggles, and you're probably going to find, some amount of enchantments, whether that be Cartouche of Solidarity or another Cartouche that may be on this list. I think this card does a really good job of making that deck just a little bit better going into the mid to late game. And again, that kind of worries me a little bit because I really hate Boggles, and it's very, very sad. So coming in at number 2, I was very happy when I saw that card because anyone who watches Pauper Ponderings knows my love for the card Electra Curry, and we've got essentially a strictly better version in Blazing Volley. This is 1 red for a sorcery. It deals 1 damage to each creature your opponents control. It might not be strictly better, but I do like this card a lot. The sorcery speed of it definitely means that you're not going to be able to get the blowout as often as you'd like, and who knows, maybe that makes Electra Curry still the card to go to, but being 1 red is so huge, and I could definitely see this people trying it out right away, and who knows, it might end up being terrible. It might end up being just not as good as Electra Curry. But I do love me an Electra Curry, and when they print something like this, I just definitely get excited. When I first saw this card, I assumed it was an instant, and I assumed it only dealt it to attacking creatures, because that's usually how these cards work. When I saw that it was each creature your opponents control, I got really excited, and then I went back the 3rd time and saw that it was a sorcery and got a little more kind of reserved about it, but this is definitely a card that will see some play. Those white token strategies are so good. They have to play Lumen Thread Field for that reason. and I'm excited to definitely try this out. I hate those Elves decks. I lose to them a lot with Pauper Ponderings decks, and you know, maybe I'll just play 8. I'll just play 4 Electra Curries, 4 Blazing Follies, because I do love this type of card. So now, coming in at number 1. I'm not sure if you can guess it. If you haven't paused the video for the top 5, at least pause it now and go see if you can figure out what the top card is. I'll give you a second. You don't even need to pause the video. I'll give you a second here. We'll look at this beautiful art on Blazing Volley. That's beautiful, right? A bunch of arrows. I don't know how he's shooting all those arrows. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, how did that top one get there? Like, that top one. It doesn't even make sense. Where's my finger? Right there. Well, that top one. It doesn't make sense. All right, number 1 is the green Cartouche of Strength. It's 2 and a green for an enchantment or a cartouche enchanted creature you control. When it enters the battlefield, you may have enchanted creature fight target creature an opponent controls. Now, why is this card good? It also gives the enchanted creature +1/+1 and trample. Why is this card good? Well, in Modern, Boggles has, in no particular order, they have Path to Exile for removal. They have Rancor for trample. They also have the 1 and a white protection from creatures aura, which lets them get through. Now, what do creatures in Pauper, or what do the Boggles have to get through? Well, they have Rancor, and that is essentially it. What this card does is it basically checks off 2 of the glaring weaknesses that Boggles had. That was their ability to punch through a large amount of creatures, and their ability to deal with opposing creatures while not having to skim on their enchantment count. And this card shores up both of those very well, and again, I am very disappointed by that, because I hate Boggles. You, right there at home, should hate Boggles. But if you want to play it and win games, I guess you probably could. The way that this thing can come down, kill a smaller creature, let your guy attack through basically whatever, because it's going to have trample. Huge card. I can see this coming in definitely as a 1 of, maybe even a 2 of in Boggles going forward. I think it's more important than the white one, just because this is an effect we really haven't seen yet. The ability to puff your creatures while also dealing with a problem creature if they have it. That's why I think this is the best card for Pauper from Amonkhet. So, did you agree with my list? Did you disagree with my list? I'm sure a lot of you disagreed with my list. I would love to hear how much of an idiot I am in the comments. Please leave them. Please tell me your top 10 lists. Please tell me your top 5 lists. Tell me how right you were in predicting my top 5 list. Most of all, just watch and have a good time, because this is Pauper Ponderings. We love to have a good time. And remember, I got decks coming tomorrow. Thursday, as always, 11 a.m. Make sure you check us out, www.themanabase.com. Every single Thursday, pumping out the sweetest Pauper decks on YouTube. Thanks for watching, guys. Again, if you like this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Check us out online, www.themanabase.com. If you like my videos, check out my Patreon just in the description below. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you tomorrow.